Yo, what up? And welcome to Encounter the Spire, where we talk about the fights that I like in Slay the Spire 2, a game I like. This covers the elite fights in the other Act 1 biome, Underdocks. I'll be referencing both the early access and the beta branch build because for one particular enemy, it has already gone through a bunch of changes. Now, the Underdocks is pretty interesting as an Act 1 biome. I personally feel that it is a lot harder, or at the very least, you can't just take a bunch of attacks and expect to win. It kind of requires you to be a little more balanced when it comes to building a deck, and the enemies, particularly the elites, really show that. However, I do like how thematic a lot of the fights and the events in the Underdocks are, so they got that going for them. But that's another video. For now, let's talk about the elites, starting with Phantasmal Gardener, or Gardeners, I guess. Not so sure what's really garden-y about these eels, and being phantasmal, it implies that they're probably ghosts or illusions. It's probably that this is just one eel that looks like four. In any case, these like wiggly weeds are pretty interesting. I'm guessing they are supposed to be like evil seaweed and not eels. But I don't know, they do have a lot of bite in them. So, but in any case, it passes the looks test for me. Now, for the mechanics, it can be a little bit intimidating. The skittish mechanic, where it hides when it's attacked once, giving it some defense, can be frustrating to deal with, especially if you hit it with an AoE and then you want to follow it up only to be blocked, basically. Then add to that the fact that one by one these gardeners buff themselves up, meaning they slowly scale up during the fight, and some of them will do like these annoying multi attacks. They can get pretty challenging to deal with. However, I think that is kind of the trick, right? They look like they are a lot. You think that you have to like AoE them down. And for some characters, that is the trick. Defect in particular shines in this fight because the orbs don't trigger the skittish mechanic. They don't hide when they get blasted by robot magic. But for other classes, I think personally, the best way to deal with them is to just hit them one by one. If you look closely, they actually have the HP of most regular enemies. Yes, the 6 block can get annoying, but if you just like focus on them one at a time, especially the ones who are about to buff or are already buff and you're sure that you can kill them, you'll find that it's actually a much more manageable fight than you think. Overall, I actually pretty like this fight. It doesn't hard counter any decks, it's just more of the basics, and it just encourages you to have a variety of attacks on the ready, whether it is just blasting on one of them or maybe you do go on a more AoE build. And the strength scaling isn't really that big of a ramp, so you can kind of go toe to toe with them for a little bit longer. So yeah, overall, I give them a Nori out of 10. Up next, we have the Terror Eel, which is an even bigger eel, I guess. So this big guy is probably my favorite out of the 3 elite fights in the Underdocks. I like the way it looks. It's just, like I said, like a big eel, very terrifying. Even the model is big enough, so it has that elite aura that I kind of look for when reviewing these things. In fact, it even looks more terrifying than some of the Act 1 Underdogs bosses, like with them being just a rock or just a big fish or literally just an even bigger Lagavulin. So yeah, I really like the look of this guy. And as for the mechanic, the reason why this is my favorite because it has something similar with Birdonis, the one from Act 1 Overgrowth, wherein the mechanics are pretty simple and it's pretty straightforward with one small thing. So the Terror Eel actually just cycles throughout a bunch of attacks and buffing itself to a bigger attack, and then it does it over and over again. So if you actually have a decent block plan, you can just kind of keep blocking this guy and you won't have too much of a problem. interesting that happens is that it has some sort of breakpoint where it gets stunned. And then after it gets stunned, it greatly debuffs you, giving you essentially terror the oh, terror the card. Okay, now I get it. Giving you a lot of vulnerable and basically hitting you even harder. What's interesting about this is when you stun the terror eel, depending if it has vigor or not, basically the buff, it will carry over that buff towards the big attack after the stun. So sometimes you would like to hold your attack so that if ever you need to block the big attack, it wouldn't be as painful. And I kind of like that it forces you to prepare a little bit, just think a little bit more ahead. Something strategic, but also pretty simple to add to your thought process, especially for an Act 1 elite. And for how to beat it, well, as I said, it's all about timing. You can do a little bit of assessment. Do I want to do it now? If I do it now, will I have enough attacks to basically end the fight or at least make it low enough so hopefully I can end it in the next round? Simple stuff, really. And I really, really like that. Overall, I think Terror Eel is a really fun, nice, simple, elegant design of an Act 1 Elite. I really dig it. It's a nice stress test for my deck if I can handle harder challenges. So yeah, I give it a big chompies out of 10. Finally, Skulking Colony. This freaking guy. This guy is one of the reasons why I had to switch to the beta branch to record footage as well as like look at the fight, because this guy has already gone through two beta branch changes as of this writing, and it's not even in the actual patch. And I think there's a lot of annoyances in this guy for an Act 1 Elite that a lot of people don't like, so they're having some trouble balancing it. But first, let's talk about how it looks. Its vibes are pretty cool. It's a bunch of really angry barnacles, I think. I guess that's what we get for throwing plastics in the ocean. But to me, it doesn't really have the elite vibe, the aura that I'm looking for. Maybe because the model is a little bit too small. I prefer it were a little bit bigger, a little bit more menacing. You know how Gremlin Knob from the first game, he's kind of just standing there, but just looking at the Gremlin Knob, you'll be like, ugh. You'll already be kind of nervous at what he's gonna do. That kind of vibe. It doesn't have to look like a cosmic horror. It kind of just needs to look a little bit more threatening. But what's threatening is its mechanics, particularly Hardened Shell. This is the thing that makes a lot of players frustrated, including me. What it does is simply, it gives you a limit as to how much damage it can take per round. The mechanics are actually pretty simple, but that's also where the frustrations begin. So from the early access release, you can kind of kill it in around 4 turns, assuming you just max out the limit. And then, I guess some people found it a little bit too easy. So they changed it and decreased the Hardened Shell limit. So it takes a few more turns to actually kill it. And that few more turns is enough to really frustrate a lot of players. So for those in the beta patch, it was really just run ending for some of them. They are probably as tough, maybe even tougher than some of the Act 1 bosses in the game right now. That's how frustrating it was. Add to that the fact that it also gives you dazes, meaning when you cycle back to your deck, you now have a bunch of junk. Now, the latest version of this removes the dazes and nothing else, which I thought will not be that big of a change, but it does now make it feel a bit more manageable. I am still not a big fan of just being able to deal 15 damage a turn, because at least it will take around 6 rounds, but Now, for how to beat this guy, I think this is the one where it really checks how balanced your deck is. Because of that damage limit, it expects you to have a lot more defense spread out across the deck. So, having basically better defense or ways to lessen the strength of the enemy or weaken them, those are pretty much required if you want to be able to get out of this fight with a decent amount of health. And that is something really a lot of players, especially newer ones, and there are a lot of people coming to this game, might have a hard time understanding. And you can see the struggle with them because this guy is probably the subject of a lot of really colorful feedback. Overall, I think eventually they will be able to land the sweet spot for the Skulking Colony. I am also not Mega Crit, and I kind of trust them that they will figure things out. Until then, this will probably be the bane of a lot of players when they land to the Underdocks, and I guess we really just have to get good. I give it a macroplastics out of 10. In conclusion, I find the Underdocks elites to be a lot more interestingly built than the overgrowth ones. While there are some overtuned fights, I think the point of the Underdogs it wants a more balance, a more experience, a more solidly built deck out of you than something like Overgrowth, where I think you can get away with a lot more things. I guess that makes sense because you have to unlock the Underdogs. Although that does beg the question that what do you actually get if you go to the Underdogs instead of the Overgrowth? I feel like there should be some sort of, maybe not a direct reward, but an interesting incentive. Not necessarily an upgrade, but an option as to why I would rather go through this than what I feel is the easier biome. But again, this is all early access, and there is still a lot more patches to go. So we will just have to see what MegaCrit has in store. Personally, I am having a lot of fun whichever Act 1 biome I get, and I'm actually excited to see the what I assume will be the alternate biomes for Act 2 and Act 3, and maybe Act 4 or hints of it. But till then, I'll see you next time, and bye me.